Joining us now, Eugene Robinson, Pulitzer Prize-winning opinion writer for The Washington Post, who'd thought he'd seen it all, and David Corn, Washington bureau chief for Mother Jones. They are both MSNBC political analysts. Eugene, I just news like this tonight, the president yelling at televisions in the West Wing of the White House, just when we think we have a reasonably clear understanding of what's going on inside that building, we get these new details that frequently harken back to what were Nixon's final days in the White House, where apparently he was railing at the portraits in the White House.
Yeah, it's awfully early to be getting to the final days sort of stage of the president's state of mind. But we seem to have been there for a while, actually. I mean, it's been clear for a while, Lawrence, from his tweets and from what we hear from his incredibly leaky inner circle. The president is, I think the technical term is, totally freaked out by this investigation. And so, you know, it makes everyone wonder exactly why. Which element of this investigation is he so exercised about? Is it the question of collusion? Is it perhaps the question of obstruction of justice? Or is it the financial aspect, the investigation of potential financial shenanigans or dealings, who knows, with Russians? That means maybe we would, maybe the prosecutor, Mueller, will have to look at the books of the Trump Organization and the Kushner companies, and so maybe that's what he's so worried about. It's kind of unclear, but we're there, final days.
And David Corn, one way we got here is that the president took the advice of the person who's considered just the smartest person in the Trump family, Jared Kushner. He took his advice, this completely inexperienced child in White House terms, who's advising a president that he should fire an FBI director. He actually took that advice, and if you're going to fire anyone now, as a result of all the problems you've had because you fired the FBI director, why wouldn't you start with Jared Kushner?
Well, you know, I think Jared Kushner was, I'm not sure he came up with the idea. I'm not sure he had to come up with the idea. During the campaign, I went back and looked at lots of videos of Donald Trump giving these success seminar lectures when people would pay $100 to come in and see him and learn how to make billions, whether he made billions or not. And he said this again and again and again. It was kind of how he started the talk. He said, I'll tell you something they don't teach you at Wharton or Harvard Business School, and this is my #1 rule. If someone screws you, you screw them back. But you don't just screw them back, you screw them back 5 times worse, 10 times worse, 15 times worse. So he has always lashed out, and as the guy who owns his own business, a family-run business, he can do that and get away with that. He's been getting away with stuff all the time, and I think his big conceptual failure since becoming president is that he didn't understand that he does not own the U.S. government. He is the caretaker. So he can't do anything he wants with the U.S. government the way he could with his own business. So I do think he may be thinking about firing Rosenstein the way he said, I don't like Comey, I'm going to get rid of him. But you know what? There are checks and balances, even in a Donald Trump administration.
David, where would we be tonight if Donald Trump had simply stopped lashing out? Let's say he stopped lashing out on Election Day and just followed everybody's advice. I'm not tweeting anymore. You know, that's not presidential. And we had none of the lashing out tweets at all, because pretty much all of the public lashing out has been through Twitter. Imagine if there was none of that. Would we have a special prosecutor tonight?
Well, if he had fired James Comey the way he did, we may still have that. You know, the issue is, you know, people always say the cover-up is worse than the crime. That came out of Watergate, a reference to the documentary you saw earlier. But sometimes the crime actually is bigger than the cover-up. We don't know still what happened during the campaign and whether Donald Trump and his people were egging on or encouraging the Russians. They at least didn't say anything to stop them. I'm not talking about collusion, but I'm talking about aiding and abetting. And so that's something that he clearly cannot acknowledge. He can't even acknowledge that the Russians did this. So I think the poisoned fruit, the original sin of Donald Trump, is not being able to criticize the Russian covert operation against American democracy, and everything kind of follows from that.
Gene, quickly before we go to the commercial, if we were to just eliminate all of Donald Trump's tweets from election night to now, would we have a special prosecutor, do you think? Would we have a health care bill that had passed already?
Well, I think we may well have a health care bill. I agree with David. We'd probably have a special prosecutor if he suddenly fired Comey without tweeting. We would have a travel ban probably because I believe when the full court hearings of the travel ban wouldn't have had the tweets to take into account, and we might have a more, maybe a more orderly administration. I don't, maybe that's wishful thinking, but the tweets not only upset the country, they also upset the staff at the White House, and they make it impossible to communicate any idea or even any news from the White House because the president can just say the opposite.
Well, all of that staff knew exactly what they were signing up for. We're going to have to take a break here. David Corn, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.